So I'm Vogel. I work as an open source developer for OpenCraft, and I'm here today to talk about the contribution that OpenCraft made with the Harvard Kennedy School. That was a significant contribution to the analytics pipeline, and basically the process that we went through and what we learned for how to make these large scale changes. So I'm going to talk about some big reasons to contribute, and basically then go through the journey that both our client and we made to decide what to change, what they needed, and then the process about actually contributing the change. So how many people here use insights in some form or another? Yeah. And so of you, are you using it on edX.org or using Open edX in your own installs? Your edX, and on your own installations? Yeah, that's fantastic. So you guys have actually set up a full analytics stack and running. Yeah, that's great. So how many people are downloading reports from the pipeline or from the instructor dashboard and using those reports? Yeah, that's cool. And so basically, if you've been going through this process, you probably have pieces of information or graphs or data that you wish you could get out of the pipeline that aren't necessarily available there. Then how many people download your tracking logs and just crunch through those tracking logs with scripts, have custom things that you need to do? And so yeah, you clearly know that there are things that there's data that isn't being pulled out that you wish you could have. So basically, and then okay, how many people have gone through the upgrade cycle of upgrading your installations? Yeah. So of all of these use cases, the reasons why you would contribute, they're obviously to improve insights and improve the graphs that you can see on those pages and the reports and the data you can see. But the major reason from our perspective to contribute is it allows the community to maintain your changes. So rather than you having to patch them in every time, everybody else is responsible for making sure that those changes continue to work. And so unfortunately, our client wasn't able to make it to this conference, but he was kind enough to talk to me on Hangouts, and it was a fantastic conversation. Actually, the whole thing was really great. But so I just picked out some sound bites from that, basically just to give them a chance to talk through from an educator perspective what they needed this data for, and why they decided to modify insights to do that. So this is the next slide's a video from Michael Fryer. Ooh, let's see whether or not we can push play. But he's with the Harvard Kennedy School. And I'll just let him speak. Or let him know.
Hi, my name is Michael Fryer. I'm a research fellow with Evidence for Policy Design at Harvard Kennedy School. And I've been working with Jill on creating a custom solution for learner data on our Open edX instance, edX. We are an initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School, founded and run by a group of development economists. And in a nutshell, we work to unite research and practice for smart policy. So trying to bring insights from economics to make policies more effective, particularly in Asia and the Middle East are our focused areas. As a subset of what EPOD does, we have this program that was funded with UK aid from the UK government called Building Capacity to Use Research Evidence. And so that was specifically aiming to work with policy decision makers, civil servants in South Asia, in India initially, and then now Pakistan, Nepal are places where we have ongoing work. We ran our courses in a way where we wanted to start out with input from Harvard faculty members and courses led by Harvard faculty members, but we wanted to scale up as well and do so using a blended learning approach where we combined digital units and in-person instruction. So ePodX allowed us to reach scale in the digital component such that we've had more than 1,000 civil servants now registered on the course, which in the world of MOOCs is not that much, but in the world of, I don't know what we would call ourselves, serial SPOCs, right? That these are only ever, usually about 50 people at a time are in these courses. So that's allowed us to really scale up in a way that wouldn't have been possible if we were flying people from Cambridge back and forth to Delhi and Islamabad. The first part was just having a digital platform that could run, with very little on the ground management from us. And then the second part was training local faculty members. These are often academics or former civil servants to lead these in-class sessions so that, like I said, it's not just flying people back and forth from Cambridge. So we've held 2 workshops now where we've trained a total of around 60 different instructors to help us scale up in leading these in-person sessions that follow the digital units that the participants, the civil servants, complete, often in the context of mid-career trainings that happen at civil service academies in the countries where we work. It really helps for sustainability and buy-in to be doing this through these national training academies, the National School of Public Policy in Pakistan, the National Academy of Administration in India. And the second thing that we found is that having the digital units be completed in a computer lab session where we don't quite lock the doors, but you've set aside 2 hours on the agenda during which time we're gonna do these digital units. And we found that as opposed to, which is not the traditional way that MOOCs are run, but that was really important for us. It allows for that kind of shared experience where you're going through this together. But the beauty of it is because it's through edX, you're going at your own pace to a certain extent, which with our learners that really vary in terms of their background is important. What we recommend is having, the first day you might do 2 of those units, and then the next day you do in-class instruction so that there's time to process the learner data, to incorporate it into your slides, to really go over it. But we've set it up ideally so that even if it's just you have a couple of hours in between, so 3 or 4, that instructor who's coming in knowing generally what they're going to cover can then fill in the blanks and do last minute adjustments based on the data that they get. And finally, being realistic about the frictions that our remote instructors who we trained would face in accessing this. When I was designing this, the goal was if someone only has 30 minutes, would they still get something out of this and find it worth using? If someone only has 10 minutes, would they still find this, worth using? If these products are designed by people who are pegging the right tail of the distribution in terms of the time they're willing to spend preparing for classes, then it's very unlikely that it's ever going to be used by anyone too far outside of that tail. And so trying to really be conscious of what about the person who really doesn't think that this is going to be worth their time and will give up quite quickly if it seems like that's the case. How do we design something that has as few frictions as possible so that they don't, so that they do find it worthwhile? Teaching really is, it's an art, and it's something where you're steering this process that you want it to be organic, right? You need to go where the classroom wants to go, but you want to do so in a way that at the end you got where you wanted to go and they got where they wanted to go as well. If you go into the room knowing that 80% of people disagree with the thing that you're trying to get them towards in the end, that's helpful to know so that you don't just step into this trap, because with experienced and senior learners, the knife's edge that you walk is, how do I encourage participation while also shutting down grandstanding. Because inevitably you get folks who want to share their experience, but in a way that doesn't really contribute to learning of anyone else. And so the learner data allows you to navigate that much more easily because you know what they're going to say when you call on them before, and you also know who else who else can be your ally, right? So if someone's going on for a couple of minutes, you can say, okay, let me stop you, and then Sarah, I know that you disagreed. So like, can you talk a little bit about why you had a different response from Mushtaba? Saying that out of a classroom of 60 or so students, there were 5 of them who said, you know what, I'm really interested in this specific anti-poverty program. And what was more interesting was when we asked them as follow-up questions, what do you think the impact of the program is and how confident are you? For those 5 respondents, we got 5 different combinations of impact and confidence. So knowing that going into the room just changes the dynamic and it allows you to do stuff that seems like it's practically magic, right? When you say, okay, so let's say, who was interested in this? And then you know that there are about to be 5 people who are going to raise their hands and that you can have them debate with each other. And that just grounds the discussion in a much more concrete way moving forward. So we hinted at a couple of things. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, rather than being a single MOOC or a MOOC that does annual iterations, these are smaller courses where we are sometimes running them concurrently. Perhaps we have learners in different countries that are completing the same unit at the same time, or sometimes within the same country in different cities. So the ability to disaggregate data by cohort was an important one. The ability to get text responses was important for us as well. The ability to identify responses by individuals. So to see who was it who, when they submitted a text response, who was the person who said, yes, my experience with descriptive evidence is that, I am currently working in, the ministry where we're using this particular information system, because that's the person that you have in the back of your head as an instructor. Like, I'm going to call on them when I get to the part where I'm talking about bias in data, because, this is something that'll be really relevant to them. Our model relies on in-person teaching that very quickly follows the completion of online units. In terms of reporting, the fact that trying to get insights to update so that potentially within the same day you could get that data to shape, from a morning computer lab session to an afternoon in-person session, having data available that quickly, that was a key thing that Insights just frankly wasn't set up for that type of thing. The fact that a lot of our problems are not just ungraded, but also we don't mark them right or wrong, as well as the fact that giving instructor access in our model, where we have people who are leading in-class sessions, but we were a little wary about, because there's a lot of stuff, if you just kind of click through on the back end in edX, you could make some pretty significant changes to a course. So having something that didn't require granting instructor access necessarily, and that we could restrict access to, but didn't also necessarily require logins. It was really advantageous to us working with folks who are really thinking about kind of robustness and resilience and scalability, so that we didn't end up shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of designing some sort of short-term solution that wound up constraining us to something that was suboptimal long-term.
That felt a little long, but so can I go next? So yeah, as you can see, they built a custom dashboard, so they didn't end up using Insights for their day work, but they use everything else about the pipeline. So they've got queries that delve into the analytics API, and the pipeline tasks, obviously, that process the data and expose them to the API as well. And so I think that was part of the takeaway of this project, was realizing that the pipeline it's not just what you see, it's everything else underneath, and all of those bits are accessible. I'm having trouble with the clicker. It's not letting me talk anymore. So yeah, so they had their own, they were going to build their own custom dashboard, but they had very specific changes that they needed from the API and downloadable data. So what we built to address those points, so they needed data divided by cohort, so we added a change that provided a CSV download for that data. They needed text responses for each individual learner, and so we added a report that generated those things. Those responses also needed to be sorted like according to their course, so we added some API hooks. The main complexity, which was funny, it's like such a small thing. It seems like running these tasks more frequently, you should just be able to update the data, right? But because of the way the data is partitioned for efficiency and for scalability, it's actually kind of there's partitions, and so we had to adjust how the data is partitioned. So instead of partitioning it daily, we have a customizable partition that can basically be done on any time interval. And then you also have to make sure that the data that's feeding that pipeline is coming in frequently enough as well. So there were some subtle tweaks to that. And then the last 2 points were actually covered by their custom dashboard. And yay, we can go next again. All right, so the visible changes that we made were very small. We basically added a downloadable problem response reports link, which when you click it, it's basically giving you an authenticated link into S3 so you can download your reports. The other thing we added was the ability to download these CSVs. And so this page, this is the learner-specific changes that edX has developed. And you can filter those reports. That data goes into Elasticsearch, which is very quick to query and filter. And so all we literally had to do was just provide another way of getting to that data. And so that provided programmatic access for their custom front end to be able to get to the bits of data that they needed. So how did we go about, those look like small surface changes, but there were some pretty major things that went on underneath. So how did we go about actually making this contribution? And these guidelines, I mean, this isn't just analytics specific. This is basically anytime you want to make any major change to the platform, it's a good idea to go through a part of this process at least and make sure you engage in this way. So the pipeline, as we've discussed, it has several components. There's the pipeline, the API client, the insights dashboard, the configuration, all of these pieces. And there's teams that are dedicated to all of these pieces, and so making sure that you know how your change might affect all of these pieces or what you can benefit from those pieces is good. Anything that covers multiple components is technically now significant. And so it's covered by edX's Significant Contributions Guide, and I've got some links at the end for that. So yeah, communication is the biggest part of making a contribution. And I say, yeah, start early, start public. So when you've got an idea, you've got a change that you want to make, talk about it out in the world, find out if anybody else is doing it, find out if edX is already doing it, because it's very possible that this is already something that other people are working on. Get yourself an open source team contact. So the OSCM at edX.org, fantastic people. They will help shepherd you change through and figure out who you need to talk to in edX. There's mailing lists. There's I would put up like a ballpark feature specification. So these are the things in general that we think we want to do. What's the goal? Does anybody else need it? Is it already there? And what you'll find is you'll get back information about what are the gotchas you're going to encounter, what are the problems you're going to run into, and just upcoming changes that might end up conflicting with what you're trying to do. And ultimately also have an estimated timeline of when you think this might be happening, because I guess we're not working in isolation. We are working together, and so if you're going to need help from other people, they need to be able to figure out how that's going to fit into their schedules as well. More communication, have clear goals, decide early what's the data you need, where do you need it to come from, where is it going to be sourced from, and specific examples. And if you can come up with a mock-up of what you want that data to look like early on, then everybody knows what you're talking about, everybody knows early, and then you can use that data for your tests. So if you have a sample situation and you've got a sample output that you want, you can then use that at the end when you're writing your tests. And also then for your stakeholders, obviously, you can say, if we show you this, is this what you want to see? And they can say, yes, that is, or no, that's not quite right. And implementation plans. So once you've got a sort of a ballpark idea of what you want to do, having a detailed idea of each component that you're going to be modifying, where you want those changes to go, and that gives edX a very clear idea of what's going to be changing, and they'll be able to figure out in detail what upcoming changes might affect this, and what else you may need to think about. I know specifically for this change, my idea of how this change was going to work morphed massively throughout the whole contribution process. Like that implementation plan and the evolution of that just helped immensely with the whole process. And basically, before we touched a line of code, we knew where we were going to need to be modifying. And I've got links to that plan at the end as well. Major questions like, does it scale? Because when you're talking about contributing something back to edX, it's got to either be something that is going to work with the existing edX data, or have a feature flag that you can turn it off, so that if it isn't going to work on edX, then we can make sure that it doesn't get shown. That problem response report link that we show, if you don't run the tasks, that link sends you nowhere, so you don't show the link if there's no data to back it. And so just simple things like that of not just thinking inside of your world, but thinking about how everybody else might want to use it. Understanding who might benefit from the change. Is there a GUI change? If there's a GUI change, you need to think about accessibility and making sure that it's where it actually fits into the UX design. Excuse me. And so this implementation plan should result in a clear plan of what you're going to build and when. And through your open source contact, you can find out when edX is going to have time to help you actually get this through. Because what you don't want to do is basically build this big, beautiful thing and just hand it to them and say, okay, merge it. Because by that time, you've already spent the time and the effort, and it may or may not fit. So yeah, starting early and having everybody have an idea of what's gonna happen. But then, ta-da, you can implement. And even while you're implementing, continuing the communication is very important. Again, what I was building ended up morphing hugely throughout the actual implementation process, but because we had contact during that, and that's one of my lessons learned also at the end is really, like, if you're having trouble while you're implementing, talk to them, because there's a huge amount of help there. And it is a complex process. The analytics pipeline it's a complex beast, and so getting help early is always a good idea. Also, if you're noticing that there's any changes to the scope or the direction or the timelines or whatever you're ending up building, then also that's good to feedback, because everybody agreed on the plan, and if the plan changes, it's good to know early that happened. And so yeah, obviously tests, I mean, everybody's pro-test, but realizing that the tests that you put in, the full integration tests, you say, all right, this data comes in, this data comes out the other side, these tests protect your contribution. So what I was saying earlier about when you've contributed a change, you've merged it upstream, and now the community maintains it for you, they can't maintain it unless they know exactly what should be coming out of your change. And so in general, people don't modify tests. We don't go in and we change like the back end and we can refactor the whole thing, and as long as the data that comes out the other end is the same, then everybody's happy. So having tests that protect your contribution in detail are very important. If you've got configuration flags that change the output and you've got customers that are dependent on particular parts of that configuration, making sure you test every single one of those so that if somebody does come along and need to make a change and they need to move things around, they don't break what you've built. And yeah, so lessons learned, communication. So I was really shy when I started off still kind of am, but started off communicating during this process, because it's this big system and it's very complicated, and you're like, you start struggling at really basic levels, and it's like, well, why would I ask that question? Yes, thank you. 5 minutes. All right. So yeah, there are a lot of people going through the same process, a lot of people that are hitting the same problems that you are. So talk, communicate, build accurate sample reports for your tests, and realized that working on the pipeline does take time. Can I ask, is that 5 minutes left to speak or 5 minutes left in the room? Oh, sweet, we're all right then. Yeah. So yeah, and realizing that it does take a bit of time to ramp up. There are a lot of technologies involved in the pipeline. There's a lot of things that are basically worth reading about and taking on their own. We're not doing anything with Hadoop or with EMR that other people aren't doing. And so even taking the time to learn a bit about those technologies and what they do, even outside of the pipeline, is a good idea. Okay, so we got thanks. So this project was funded with UK aid from the UK government. And Maria Flanagan, May Klinger, Dan Levy at Harvard Kennedy School were heavily involved, and of course Michael Fryer, who spoke earlier. And a massive thank you to absolutely everybody on the analytics team, and the people in the platform that also helped us through, and specifically our open source contribution manager George was great, and Shauna helped us work on the significant changes process and policy documentation. And so I've got some links. If you have any questions for Michael or about the program, please look it up. I've got links to the talk at the end as well. And their custom dashboard is here, and their online training course is here. This is the site that's about their program. And yeah, so just references for how to make significant changes. So there's a significant contribution guide, developer links everywhere that are absolutely fantastic for just getting started doing the development. These forums, if you've got new features you want to talk about, this is a great place to talk about it. If you're talking about deployment and ops issues, then it's better to talk to ops. But again, everybody's happy to shuffle you around and give guidance wherever you need to go. The roadmap is a useful starting point for big sort of large-scale changes, but if you've got little things you want to do, they probably won't make it on there, so just ask on the forums. And edX's Jira is also public, so if you need to go on there and find out what kind of tasks are coming up and what the status is, that's a good spot too. And yeah, we are OpenCraft. We've got some documentation about the deployments that we do. We use AWS, and so there's scripts and configuration files and sample setups, and the Ansible scripts and all the things that we use to set up our deployments is there. The implementation plan that came out of this project is available in public, and all the comments and all of the evolution of the document is also it was actually a pretty major change, and this is the link for this talk. So I'm assuming all these links are going to be published somewhere on the site anyway. So yeah, no huge rush on that. So yeah, I think we're good. Does anybody have any questions or stories or things they'd like to share? Yeah.
Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an estimate of end-to-end? How long did this project take? And what the process going?
How many hours did we end up with? I think it was a larger change than we thought it was going to be initially, and there was a few features that we ended up having to drop. So I think it ended up at 200 hours from us. And I don't know how much, well, I know that there was like a year and a half of planning that Harvard Kennedy put into deciding what they needed to do to begin with when they were basically designing their courses. And so before they even came to us, that was a significant effort. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was curious, why did you decide to open source this specific thing? And actually, more generally, I'm curious how you think about it's a pretty big tax to contribute back. So how do you decide when to pay the tax?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I consider that it's best to pay the tax up front. If you consider that every time we do an upgrade, you have to merge your changes back. Every time you upgrade, you have to merge. It's basically an infinite cost. Because if you assume that we'll be around forever, which is nice to assume, then that's always going to grow. But if you do it up front and you do it first, then you're not only making a contribution and you're making sure that your change works well with the current system, but anybody who wants to make an improvement to it, anyone that wants to add to it can add to it. And so, yeah, everything that we do, we contribute back. That's a policy with our clients. But I agree. Yeah, everything that OpenCraft does gets pushed. So it doesn't always get merged exactly how we thought it was going to be at the beginning, but everything that we do gets merged upstream. So, Anybody else have any? Cool. Hey, I think that's it then. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.